I've been wrestling with a suitable way to start this episode of the RG10 podcast for quite some time, trying not to sound clumsy or trite, and you'll soon realise why. It's about a new charity that's been established in Wargrave. That's the simple bit. The next part is not so straightforward, because it deals with a situation that is almost beyond comprehension. The charity is run by bereaved parents for bereaved parents. It's called Footprints Baby Loss, and it provides vital support for families who've lost one or more of their twins and triplets before, during or after birth. Suzie Scofield and Sharon Darke are the co-founders. I was lucky enough to speak to them about the story behind the charity and the difference it's already made to people's lives. They also gave words of advice to those who struggle with what to say to friends who've lost a child. I started by asking Suzie how she and Sharon met.
Well, I met Sharon about 11 years ago, soon after my twins, Rory and Daniel, passed away. And I kind of reached out for some support, which was sort of peer-to-peer support. And Sharon was my befriender. So I used to speak to her on the phone kind of about once a month for an hour or two. And she just really gave me just incredible critical support in those early few months after the twins died, and that led on to just getting to know her family and her getting to know mine a little bit, and then actually in the long run we both ended up sort of volunteering and working in the baby loss charity sector together.
And Sharon, tell me a bit about your story as well. There was a reason, I guess, that you and Suzie could make such a good connection.
Yeah, so my twin boys, Charlie and Joshua, were born 24 years ago now. They were born prematurely, and Charlie lived for a week, and Joshua lived for 2 weeks. I then got some support myself, some peer-to-peer support, which at the time, as Susie said, was an absolute lifeline. Just talking to somebody else who had at least twin boys. It was really exciting to find out I was expecting twins, and then to lose them. It felt really lonely. So then I volunteered at charity as a befriender for about 14 years and supported many, many families, many mums and dads who had lost their twins before working myself as a twin and triplet bereavement lead. Then Suzie was one of the people that came to us for support. And like she said, we developed a friendship quite quickly, and we're luckily quite close together, so we would meet up and our children would play together and things like that.
Yeah, Suzie, back to you. How valuable was it to be connected to someone who'd been through something so similar?
Yeah, I think that for me, lots of different types of support after I lost the twins. And some of that was professional support. All of the support I got from family and friends, and everything was really, helpful. But the most helpful support for me was speaking to somebody who had that exact sort of, very similar lived experience as well, and just seemed to kind of get what I was saying. Just understood all those complex emotions you have at that time. There's so many different emotions that you feel. And as Sharon's already mentioned, there's the loneliness as well, which although, you can be surrounded by people, until you get to speak to people who've actually experienced a very similar type of loss, you just start to feel connected to people. And that's what I found.
Suzie, is there any other similar kind of support out there? Is this unique?
This is pretty unique in terms of it being a charity that is run entirely by people who are also bereaved of a twin or triplet. So Sharon and I obviously are, but we have an amazing group of volunteers who are also all bereaved parents. We've got mums and dads, we've got a granny, and all of them, are, I suppose, having found that support helpful themselves, or wanting to find, something good to come out of their really traumatic and difficult experiences. And this is a way of kind of giving back, I suppose.
What has the reaction been from people who have, experienced footprints baby loss from families, the success stories, if you like, for want of a better phrase.
Yeah, we've had already, we've only been going 3 weeks, and we've had people coming from all over. So we've had people all over the UK. I've had somebody from Australia, someone from the Netherlands, America, and I think nearly everybody who comes to us, whether it's like by an email, by a telephone call, it's that feeling of being with somebody who gets it, somebody who understands. Often, we've been the first person that those people have ever spoken to about their twins or their triplets. They get to say their names, they tell us all about them, questions that don't always, get asked to you after you lose a baby. So yeah, just generally hopefully a feeling of being welcomed into a community that obviously nobody wants to be in, because nobody wants their babies, to have died. But, we are in this situation, and it's just, one of warmth and hopefully a safe space where people can share. And we have online communities as well. So if people aren't quite ready to pick up the phone and have a conversation, they can share in a Facebook group, like I've already said, by email. So we have online groups. We've had one online group so far, and we've got one next week, a bit like this, where we'll have a Zoom call, and people can share in a really safe, small space there. So, we've tried to really think about the different ways we offer support, and hope that, there is one way or more than one way that will suit everybody.
How on earth do you cope, deal with the emotion, when you hear these awful, awful stories of grief from so many people? It must be so difficult for you.
Yeah,
Since
it is hard. It's really hard, and but I don't really know the answers in terms of sort of how we cope. We definitely support each other. We've got lots of support mechanisms in place for ourselves, and definitely for our volunteers as well, because it is a lot to kind of relive your own experience of loss and trauma and things. But I think because we felt how helpful that was for us, we know how helpful that is for the people we're speaking to, and we get really lovely feedback, even when we just speak to somebody, for that first time, and that sense of relief that they express just in being able to kind of talk so openly and candidly about, some of the things that they're feeling. So, um, yeah, and I think we probably just over time, I definitely couldn't have done what I'm doing now, in those early years after losing my twins. I think that it's something that you just sort of build over time, that ability to listen to other stories. But I don't know, Sharon, would you add
Yeah,
anything
I,
to
I was
that?
just going to say, for me as well, it's always been really, really important to keep my twins' memory alive. And I love to say their names. I love to talk about them. I love when people ask me about them. So for us, that's nice as well. We've got, a lovely network of, a lovely community of people that we can share our experiences with. And that feels really special.
Just one other thing to add to that is just that we also, as a charity, kind of are um, focusing on getting kind of the word out there with in terms of the care that people are receiving, even in hospitals and things. So that bereavement care from the midwives and the neonatal nurses and all the health professionals that are involved. And I think it's really lovely to build up those connections as well, and to kind of feel that we are hopefully, improving what might be going on in those settings as well, just by telling our stories and supporting other people, through those times. And yeah, it's a sort of bigger picture as well.
Sharon, you touched on it just a moment ago. What do you say to people, I guess, people who don't know about your families, or don't know you, and they might say, "Hey, do you have a family or anything like that?" How do you answer that? How do you respond?
Yeah, I think for me it depends a little bit. In the early days, I would tell everyone all the time about the twins, and sometimes, that could be quite a difficult conversation when you're just, meeting someone in a shop or something. Someone happens to see a photo in your purse or something like that. But I think now I've realised that some of those conversations can be tricky. But I do like to say about my twins. So I'll often say I've got two other children, Jessica and Samuel, who are older now. They're 23 and 21, and I had twins, and they would be 24. And yeah, mostly people are good and I get a nice reaction, but sometimes, like I say, it can be a tricky reaction, but most people do know about them. I do talk about them a lot. And I do a lot of fundraising, and we will be doing lots of fundraising for our new charity. So people have been really lovely and supportive. I've done a couple of marathons, and I've done different types of support, fundraising over the years, as they would have got to certain ages. So like when they were 18, I did a nice 18th fundraiser.
And Susie, crossing to you now. I must admit, this is, I've done hundreds and hundreds of interviews over the years, but this has got to be one of the hardest I've ever had to do, knowing quite what to ask. It's really, really tricky. So I wondered what kind of advice you'd give. What would you say to just people who are speaking to you about this kind of thing? Who I imagine they can feel incredibly awkward, not quite knowing what to say. Um, and it sounds daft, really, but any advice you give to them? What things they should ask, what they shouldn't ask, what boundaries they shouldn't cross? What do you
Yeah.
think?
I don't think it's a daft question at all. I think it's something we get asked all the time, and I think it's really understandable. I think we can all think of situations we've been in where we're with somebody who's experienced the death of, whether it's a husband or a granny or a child, and it's really hard to know what to say. But having experienced that loss, and all I would say is that actually the most important thing is that people do acknowledge your babies. And I think something that's really hard for other people to imagine around baby loss is that when you have those babies, and if they die, you still have that same huge, overwhelming sense of sort of pride that you have when you have a living baby. And you want to talk about your babies, and you want to share as much information about them as possible, if people are okay to listen. And that it's okay for people to kind of not feel able to do that, but if people are, then I would definitely say acknowledgement and asking people. And I suppose another bit of advice would just be to kind of be guided by the person who's lost that baby or babies. So using similar language that they're using, whether people use the word death or loss, whether they're using their baby's names or not, or actually just saying, I don't really know what to say, is okay. It's still an acknowledgement. And yeah, I don't know if that's helpful, and I'm sure Sharon might add something onto that. But yeah.
No, I think you answered that really well. And I think, the thing that Susie's just touched on is that we're all different, and we're different days as well. So, especially when people are in the early stages of that really, really raw grief, as much as you might want to talk about it, you might have odd days where you're maybe at work or you're in the middle of Tesco's or something that's just not appropriate, or you just can't do it at that point. So I think Susie's suggestion of just being guided by the person is a really, really valid one. And, we have people, and we've spoken to people that, will be in their family, amongst their family for a weekend or a week or on holiday, and their babies aren't acknowledged the whole time. And I think that can be really, really tough. And sometimes in those early days, you're not really strong enough to guide that conversation or to suggest that you might like to talk about it.
There's no right or wrong. It's a really
Yeah.
impossible thing to answer, and that's why I don't ever want anyone to feel that they've done the wrong thing. It's just one of those things you have to kind of um, go down that road, to get together, if it's a friend or a family member, and you just work your way through it. And sometimes you'll get it spot on. Other days you might, do be the other end of the spectrum. But probably most of the time, you're doing a really good job supporting that person.
Finally, then, I'll start with you, Susie, on this one. 10 years' time, looking to the future, if you could briefly kind of summarise for me, what are your hopes for the charity?
I just hope that we are in a position where we can be sustaining that support. We've got loads of ideas on top of the support we're already offering. Loads of really good ideas actually on how we can try and reach further and appeal to lots of different communities and different kind of groups within that bereavement community. So it would be lovely to have potentially kind of introduced some new things. And maybe have seen a bit more of an impact just in terms of improving bereavement care across the country, really across the UK, particularly, maybe even further. You never know, but it's such a postcode lottery at the moment. What care's out there? There's loads of incredible bereavement care, but it does vary from hospital to hospital and from community to community. So just seeing a bit more of a kind of sort of equal and stable support would be something. But yeah, Sharon, you can add to that.
I think you've covered most of it, but yeah, I think initially we are really focusing on the support, and that will always be our main thing, that we want people that have a twin or triplet bereavement to have the best support that they can. But like Susie said, we've got lots of ideas about getting into hospitals, sharing our experience, talking to health professionals. We've already got a health professional on board with us. We want to, like Susie said, we want to look at different groups within our twin and triplet community. So dad's termination for medical reasons, grandparents, how to talk to siblings and surviving twins. We haven't really touched on the fact that lots of our community have a surviving twin. So that's a really really difficult situation where they're living with, obviously, joy for the surviving twin, and the obviously devastation that one of their twins or triplets have died. So yeah, like Susie said, we've just got loads and loads of good ideas.
That was Sharon Darke and Suzie Scofield, the co-founders of Wargrave-based Footprints Baby Loss, and their website is footprintsbabyloss.org. They're also about to start their first ever fundraising event called Miles in March. You can sign up to complete as many miles in March as might be a challenge for you using any mode of movement, and you can get more details on their website. And we'll provide links to all of this in our episode notes. Thanks so much for listening, and goodbye.